Hi, on today's show, we're going to focus on the exhibits running at the Newark Museum and the Jewish Museum called Masters of American Comics, which runs through January. This exhibit focuses on the men in comics
no, we're not. We're not done with the women in comics yet. The exhibit running at the Museum of Cartoon and Comic Art. Roll the opening, Tom, and make it snappy. Hi, welcome to Comicology. I'm Anna Cody, and this is my co-host, Jeff Peters.
Hi.
Women have taken a step up in comics thanks to She Draws Comics, 100 years of America's women cartoonists, now running at MoCCA.
And I understand you had a chance to talk to some of the women that are the featured artists in the exhibit.
Yeah, Jeff. Hey, Tom, let's roll some clips. I'm here at MoCCA, the Museum of Cartoon and Comic Arts, and I'm here with the great Trina Robbins, who is a pioneer for female comic book artists and writers of all time, and she's half curated this event. How are you today?
I am fine, Anna. Thank you.
I want to know, what is the inspiration behind your writing your first book?
You mean my first book on women cartoonists, right?
That's right.
Well, you know, I would try to sell comics, and the publishers would always say, there were no women cartoonists. Girls don't read comics. There have never been any women cartoonists. So I knew they were wrong, and I had to prove it. So I did a lot of research and wrote a book.
Oh, so you came in from San Francisco, and you are curating this event. Is that correct?
Actually, let's be honest, I'm curating half of this event. I'm curating the first half, the early 20th century women cartoonists, and most of the art is from my collection. I have the largest collection of women cartoonists probably in the world, and I can say that without worrying that anybody's going to try to steal my collection, because nobody else wants work by women cartoonists except me.
Tell me a little bit about the artists that are represented here today.
Well, we start with the very earliest cartoonists. We start with women who really created icons, like Rose O'Neill, who created the Cupies, and Grace Drayton, who created the Campbell Kids. And these icons are still known after 100 years. The Campbell Kids, in fact, were created exactly 100 years ago in 1906. So these little roly-poly children are 100 years old. They don't look it, but they're 100 years old. And of course, obviously, these women also drew comics. So we start with superstars, really, or Nell Brinkley, who was a superstar in her day. She had songs written about her. 3 popular songs were written about her, one by George M. Cohan, in fact, 2 that were in the Ziegfeld Follies. You could buy products. You could buy Nell Brinkley hair curlers. Wow. That's how world famous, or at least throughout America. And she was reprinted in England, too.
Wow. When did your interest in female, comic book writers really begin? You were always an avid reader, is that right?
I was always an avid reader. My mother taught me to read at the age of 4. She was a school teacher, and it's the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. Thank you, Mom. I know she knows how grateful I am. It opened up a world. I mean, there's nothing better than reading, and I read everything. I was the kid who reads the cereal boxes, at the breakfast table. I read every book in the house. I denuded the library, and I also read comics. And even though my mother was a school teacher, it didn't bother her that I read comics, because I read everything.
Wow. And when did you started your own underground comic, is that right?
Yes, in 1966, my first comics were published in the East Village Other, which was an early underground newspaper, obviously coming out of the East Village.
Wow, but you didn't even know that they would print them, right?
The very, very first thing they printed, I didn't even do to be printed. I had come here from Los Angeles, and I'd met like the editor and the publisher, and they were nice guys. And in fact, the editor took me to a very nice party, and I kind of wanted him to know that I liked him. So I drew this kind of proto comic, you know, with a lot of speech balloons, and kind of stuck it under the door of their offices, and they published it.
Did it work?
Oh yeah. Oh.
Talk about It Ain't About Me, Babe.
No, it ain't me, babe. Like the Bob Dylan song, who I do so love to quote.
I don't know anything about this.
Oh, you don't know the Bob Dylan song?
No.
But it ain't me, babe. No, 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 it ain't me, babe. Oh, yeah, it ain't me you're looking for, babe. That one. Well, I didn't name it. It was the first feminist underground newspaper in the West Coast, and they called themselves It Ain't Me, Babe. It was a nice turnaround, of course, because when Bob Dylan wrote that song, he's talking to a woman and saying, it ain't me, babe, and here's women talking to guys saying, it ain't me, babe, you know? So that was a great title, especially for 1970, when everybody, you know, was quoting Dylan. They still quote Dylan. But anyway, I was in San Francisco. I'd been in the Lower East Side. I came to San Francisco, and there was a big underground comic scene going on, but it was all guys. And they weren't asking me, they weren't inviting me into their books. Nobody was inviting me into their books. But I saw this great feminist newspaper. In those days we called it Women's Liberation Newspaper. And I phoned them. There was a phone number, and I said, hey, I draw. I'd love to work with you. And they said, way cool. Or actually, that far out was what they said in those days. And they were in Berkeley, and I was in San Francisco. And so I would take the bus over there, and I drew a comic for them. And because you know how in union is strength, and because I was with them, because I wasn't alone anymore, I wasn't isolated, that made me feel strong enough to put together a comic book. And that comic book was called It Ain't Me, Babe, of course, because it was done in conjunction with the underground newspaper. And that was, of course, the very first all-woman comic book ever.
Where did you find the strength to do all this on your, you know, when it hadn't really existed before, like you said, like you found something you wanted to do and then you would go approach them?
Well, that's how you do it.
And then you wrote for Barbie, didn't you?
I did.
Which seems like an interesting choice for someone who works.
It wasn't a choice, it was money. And it was, you know, it was somebody who was willing, it was a publishing company, Marvel in this case, that was willing to pay me money to write comics, which is great. And I do have to say, you know, like, believe me, I am of many minds about Barbie, but the whole crew, we were all women, first of all. It was an all-woman crew. The editor was a woman. The writers were women. The artists were women. The inkers, I was also an inker, were women. A couple of guys inked, and a couple of guys did coloring and lettering, you know, but it was mostly an all-woman crew. And I can tell you that none of them were Barbie going, oh, I think I'll go shopping. We did real stories. We did our best to do real stories. We were all feminists. We touched on things like deafness and divorce, and I did one on anorexia. You know, and also we did stories with Barbie and Skipper just having fun, you know. I did one where Skipper dreams she's a pirate queen. And, you know, we did good stuff. We did good stuff. It wasn't dreadful cliche.
So you liked the message that it was sending to young readers?
We sent a good message, and plus, just the fact that it was a comic for girls, and there were no other comics for girls. Just to do a comic for girls was an important thing.
You said something very interesting about the comic book world, the comic book shop.
The famous quote that has had comic book store owners gunning for me. Well, you know, I don't take it back. Yes, of course there are good comic book stores. And
what is that quote? I'm sorry.
Well, I don't remember the exact quote, but in the quote I do say that there are good comic book stores, because there are. But then I say that the majority of them are juvie porn shops, and I don't take that back. And girls, I mean, they get to the door and they're just overwhelmed by the vibes, and they leave.
How do you think those comic book stores could be different? I mean, and raise the kind of audience, you know, a broader audience?
Well, you know, one problem is they have to go out on a limb. Oh, actually, let's start with the fact that they have to clean the place. You know, forget about, before they ever go out on a limb, they just have to get a broom or a vacuum cleaner, you know, a dust mop, you know. After that, they have to go out on a limb. They have to carry independents. They have to carry self-published books. They have to carry zines by men and women. They have to carry comics for girls and for women. And so many of them are reluctant to do that because, you know, all they'll carry is like superheroes and books for boys. Well, it's not going to change until they go out on the limb and carry the other books.
Right. Who inspires you today, female comic book writers today?
A lot of the women who are on these very walls. I love Dame Darcy. I love Roz Chast. I was just sitting there looking at Roz Chast's book. She's hysterical. I have one of her cartoons on my refrigerator. And I was told by Dan Peraro, because I had one of his cartoons on my refrigerator too, and I told him, and he said, that's the greatest compliment you can have, is if somebody puts your cartoon on their refrigerator.
How did you become a writer? At some point, you stopped creating everything, and then you began writing the stories.
Yes. Well, I love, you know, there's that mother again who taught me to read at 4, and it wasn't just reading, obviously, it was writing too. And I wrote immediately. I was making up stories immediately. I am a storyteller. And comics, of course, are a perfect combination of words and pictures. And, you know, Joseph Campbell, I adore Joseph Campbell.
The Power of Myth.
Yeah. Well, he says, follow your bliss. You know, and I was following my bliss and doing comics, but what he doesn't tell you is that sometimes your bliss turns a corner. And my bliss turned a corner and it became writing. Wow. So I'm still following my bliss.
Do you feel you have more of an influence as a writer? I mean, those are the stories.
No, I have more of an influence. Because I can sell books, and because bookstores don't say, sorry, we can't carry this because it's for girls, because girls read books. Publishers can't say, oh, we like this, but it's for girls, and everybody knows girls don't read books, which is what the comic editors used to say, girls don't read comics, which of course we know is total bull, you know?
Right. And I do know, like, when I work in the store, it seems like the smartest kids read comic books.
The smartest kids do read comics. Actually, that's kind of a sad statement. It means that so many kids are illiterate, not illiterate, because they have learned to read, but they don't read. I've gone to high schools. I went to this one high school to talk about graphic novels, and it was really pathetic. I said, well, who here reads comics? And the few who raised their hands were the smartest kids. I actually have done several books on women cartoonists. The one from 1993 is called A Century of Women Cartoonists, but then I have that one went out of print, and in '99 I had a second book come out, published, that was called The Great Women Cartoonists, and it was kind of a kind of a new and improved version of the first. It had a lot of material from the first, but then ever so much more new material, information corrected, because there was a lot of information in the first one that I simply got wrong, my sources.
One of your inspirations for doing this, wasn't it, that when you read another compilation of, like, just in general, the greatest, that there were no women creators in it?
God, so many books came out with no women in them. I think what you're talking about is the Smithsonian Book of Newspaper Strips. This came out in, I believe, 1982. Not the Dark Ages, 1982. And there's not one woman in this book. And if you look at these walls, Grace Drayton she was so prolific. She was doing so many comics. Nell Brinkley, who was a superstar, so many other women. Tarpey Mills, who did Miss Fury, this beautiful film noir comic in the 40s. They don't even exist in this book, you know it. And I do not believe, by the way, I am not paranoid. I don't believe it's a plot. I do not believe that the men who put this book together went, hey, let's leave out the women, pass it on, you know. I don't believe that, but I do believe that men wear blinders, and they just didn't see.
Why should people read comic books today?
no one should read comic books unless they want to enjoy themselves. It's just a nice combination of words and pictures, and it's the best method of communication. I mean, if one picture's worth 1,000 words, and then you add words too, that's even better than just one picture.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
I was delighted. Thank you.
The comic itself is an adaptation of the very first book in the Babysitter's Club series, which those books were published in the 80s. There were 150 books published in total, and this is the very first one. So it's about 190 pages, the comic is.
And you paint and write it?
Well, I draw it. I mean, I'm just taking it from the original series, so I'm adapting it.
Oh my gosh.
And this is what it looks like, except it's got lettering. So it's not in color, it's in black and white. It did take me 1.5 years to do the first book, and I did book 2 in about 6 months' time.
Wow. And who's the publisher?
Oh, sorry, it's Scholastic, who was the original publisher of the book series when they were first published. So it's really cool to be working with them because they've known this property for years. And I get to work with the original author, who was an idol of mine when I was a child. So
Who's the author?
Anne M. Martin, who's gone on to win numerous awards, and she's really a well-known author in the children's book world.
And how did you get asked to do this?
I actually didn't get asked, except for to talk about how I was a fan of the book series as a kid, and they said, well, that might make kind of a cool comic. Do you want to give it a try? Do you want to do some character sketches? Would you like to do a sample chapter? And I said, all right, I guess. And the next thing I knew, I was drawing graphic novels based on these characters that I grew up reading.
Wow. And where did you learn how to do this?
I've been doing it all my life. I've always been an artist.
Because there's not that many women in the industry, right? Isn't that the point of this exhibit?
Well, if you look around, I think there's 50 people in this show, but there's hundreds more out there.
Right.
It's just a matter of them all making it and, you know, coming to the surface. And
wow. Now, talk a little bit about, I guess, how manga seems to be like what everybody's reading now. And will you talk a little bit about that and why you think that is?
I mean, I think now that there are comics being published about girls and sort of with a girlish sensibility to them, girls out there are finding them and they're loving them and they're reading them, and there's luckily these series being translated from the Japanese that have 12, 20, 40 books in a series, and girls at that age love to read and read and read and read and read. So if they can find something that they can just keep reading and really get into the way that, you know, their guy counterparts might get into Batman or something they love on television, these girls are just, you know, they love it. They love to read. So, and reading comics is just a visual way to read, and I don't know, it's just striking a chord.
Who inspires you out there now?
Out there now? Or, I mean, I grew up reading like For Better or For Worse and Calvin and Hobbes, and actually like a lot of the other artists that are in this show, like Linda Barry's over there. Not her, but her work. And it's the first time I've seen an original Linda Barry, so I was really excited by that. Like, I wasn't with anybody while I was looking at it just now, but I was like, woo, exciting.
So your work's on the wall, but you're also like jazzed to like see the other artists.
I'm surrounded by a lot of people that really inspired me, so.
Well, thank you so much. We're just so happy to talk.
It's nice to meet you.
I worked under the name of El Rene, and nobody knew that I was a woman. Everybody thought I was a man. I got a lot of fan mail because I drew Senorita Rio. That was the main strip fiction house, and everybody wanted. This was during the war, and they all wanted pin-ups of Senorita Rio, and they always addressed me as Mr. Rene. But I was.
Well, you're so feminine.
One of the first women doing comic strips, and everybody else at fiction house, they were all men. And
is that why you used a man's name?
No, I just didn't want anybody to know my first name because I come from Europe, and they're only, you know, your family and your friends address you by your first name, and I didn't want people to call me Lily where I was working. So I used El Rene, and that's really why.
Wow. and will you talk a little bit about
it? When I first came there, I did a different comic strip my mother saw an ad in the paper from Fiction House that they were looking for comic strip artists, and I didn't even look at comic strips, and I'd never drawn any comic strip. I wanted to do stage design and costume design and so forth, but I could draw. So my mother said, well, draw something and show it to them, and maybe they'll hire you. So that's what I did. I drew Tarzan and Jane, and I went there, and I got into the office in the waiting room. Secretary told me, the receptionist told me to sit down, and there were 6 men, and I sitting there with portfolios. And then the door opened, and his name was Scott. He came out, and he was a very tall man from Texas with red hair and boots on. And he looked, and he said, somebody to come in. And then he looked, and he was so astonished seeing me there, that the next time he came out, he said, you come on in. And then he looked at my portfolio, and he kept whipping back on his chair and laughing. And then he said, you know what, I'll give you a trial for 2 weeks. And he hired me. And I was thrilled, but then it was awful, because all these men in the room, they were thinking, it was terrible.
Yes.
Yes. And the figures were all drawn. I was supposed to erase pages. They never put any clothes on the girls, so they were all, nude. And I cried myself to sleep every night. I was suffering.
Really?
Yes. But I soon caught on, and they gave me a strip to do. And that was the worst strip there, Werewolf Hunters.
Yes, it's up there on the wall.
I transformed it. Instead of werewolves, I sort of made it a kind of mysterious magic kind of strip. In a very short time, I got Lost World, which was a very nice strip, and then the best one. But partly because men were going to war, and so they replaced women with, So I got to draw Senorita Rio, and then I got to do all kinds of covers, which was wonderful. And then I was thrilled to see my covers on the newsstand, making money. Yeah.
You are a beautiful artist. Where did you learn how to do this kind of
Hardly anything.
You taught yourself?
Well, yes, I had some, I went to live classes. But, I mean, we did all of this without models. So you had to make it all up,
It's amazing.
It's almost like making a film,
How long did this one run?
You had to do it very quickly. You put it in pencil, and then it went into the other room where they put the balloons in with the lettering, and then the next day you got it back and you inked it. And you inked it with a brush, it wasn't a pen. You had to learn this. You dunked it into India, inked the pen. It was like they do calligraphy, this kind of thing. So this was called inking, and people say that I ink like a man. I don't know what that means, but I ink like a man. Okay.
Michaela Reed, I was so glad to interview you today. And this is your work on the wall, right?
This is my piece. I'm a self-syndicated political cartoonist for various alternative news weeklies like the Boston Phoenix. I also work for Ms. Magazine, I've done a piece for the LA that was in the LA Times, InTheseTimes.com, the Detroit's Metro Times, and just various papers. This is one of the first pieces I did for the Boston Phoenix. I started being syndicated by the running in the Phoenix when I was still in college at Harvard. I was doing a weekly strip for Harvard, and obviously I was getting really frustrated with the Iraq War. Now the sad thing about this piece is I did this in 2003, and almost every single thing on this board is still exactly the case today. My style's changed since then. This is of course 3 years ago.
Right.
And I've been picking up more newspapers and more magazines. Particularly, I've been a lot of feminist and gay publications like Boston's Bay Windows, Minnesota Women's Press, and as I said, Ms. Magazine. I've been on Women's E! News.
Well, well, Michaela, you're incredible, and you should be in every paper. So thank you for talking to us, and you're so smart, and we appreciate it.
This is my piece. I'm Catherine Arnaldi. The title of my book is called The Amazing True Story of a Teenage Single Mom. It was published in 1998. It won a New York Foundation of the Arts Award in drawing. Wow. It was nominated for the Will Eisner Award. It won 2 American Library Association awards, so it's in every library in the U.S. It's the Kennedy Marshall Company, which did Seabiscuit, Poltergeist, E.T., Jurassic Park, had the option for 3 years, and then this year they made a commitment, so probably it'll be in the theaters in 2 years.
That's amazing!
So you may not know me now, but maybe in 2 years. No, my name in the movie will probably be like this tiny, way down at the bottom, and nobody will know me, but that'll be all right. I made the book, and I Xeroxed it myself for many years. It was first in the Bad Girl Show at the New Museum in '94. It's a support group for teen moms to hold in their hand, and that's why I'm so glad it's in the library, so that they can know that they have equal rights to education. They know that it's wrong and illegal if they read my book to be coerced to leave high school, of which teen moms are coerced to leave high school. And actually I went to New York Civil Liberties Union and started a class action lawsuit against New York City Board of Ed for coercing teen moms to leave high school.
Oh my God.
And several years ago, the interns at New York Civil Liberties Union called 28 high schools in New York City, and only 6 would allow the teen moms in. So the situation is very serious. At a time when you want to be able to support your family, you can't get equal access to education.
Where did you first get inspired about that?
Because I was a teen mom.
Is that right?
Right. So this is my story. So I had to fight for equal rights to education. I worked in a factory for 4 years. I saved money. I had it stolen. It wasn't until my friend told me the 2 words that changed my life forever: financial aid. So, now I'm like in the museum.
You must be so inspired to be here.
I am. I'm glad to be here and be one. Now I'm one instead of I am somebody.
No, you're amazing. Thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you. Good for you for bringing attention to the cartoonists, and don't forget, help a single mom today.
I am here with Hilda Terry, who I've been informed is the first ever female nationally syndicated comic strip writer. And the comic strip is called Tina. Is that correct?
Right.
Now, what year did that come out?
It came out a famous date, December 7, 1941.
Pearl Harbor.
That's how I remember the date, because I don't remember anything anymore.
So it was both 92. A great day and a horrible day. You're 92?
I'm 92.
Congratulations. You look fantastic.
Well, I never smoked. And I have had such a fantastic life.
How did you get to write the comic strip? How did you get to write the comic strip?
Oh, well, in those days, most of us quit school and went to work at 14.
Right.
And I expected to be a cartoonist. I always expected to be a cartoonist.
Did you train, or did you have family that drew?
No, it's a small town. There was a little Greek boy who was a better singer than an artist, but he and I were the only artists.
Now, how did you come up with the idea of Tina?
Oh, easy. That's me. Actually, that's not me. That's my girlfriend. I am the brunette. I'm the stooge.
She Draws Comics runs through November 6th. For more information, go to www.moccany.org. Well, that's all the time we have. In a future episode,
we'll be covering the men at the Newark Museum and the Jewish Museum in Masters of American Comics.
See you in the funny papers. Oof.